Number 1. So I've been wanting to write this encounter for a while now. Unfortunately, it has taken me a long time to even fully fathom and process the potential danger I was in the evening that this story takes place. This occurred just shy of 1 year ago. For background, I am a 22-year-old female who was attending university in a larger city 3 hours away from my hometown. Therefore, I was living alone at that time, with my closest relatives being hours away from me. I had just recently gotten out of a very abusive relationship, and honestly, I was extremely heartbroken and felt devastated. I had been living in my small one-bedroom apartment with said boyfriend for the past 2 years. After the tumultuous end of our relationship, he moved out and I remained residing in this apartment. I'm only mentioning that detail because in some way, it plays into the reckless decisions I have made on this evening. For further explanation, it was hard for me to go home to an empty apartment and amplified and worsened the heartbreak I was feeling at that time. Anyways, on to the story. My friends had decided to take me to a hockey game to get me out of my house and potentially get my mind off the breakup. It was Friday night, and we had been consuming fair amounts of alcohol during the progression of the hockey game. In the arena we were attending, there is also a casino. Following the game, we decided to head there for a few more alcoholic beverages. It was a busy night, and the line for the bar was lengthy. During the duration of the time I was patiently waiting for service, I had begun to speak to a group of 3 men and foolishly exchanged numbers with one member of their group. My friends and I decided to call it a night following only 1 drink at the casino due to the overwhelming amount of people crowding the area. We part ways, but instead of going to my home, I spontaneously and quite drunkly decide to text the man I had previously exchanged contact information with. He responds, informing me that he and his friends had relocated to a nightclub in the area and inviting me to join them to continue the night of drinking. I still regret almost every choice I've made on this evening, but I booked an Uber to meet the group of men and headed their direction. The night from there on consisted of large volumes of alcohol and dancing. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my judgment was severely lacking due to both intoxication and impulsiveness I was feeling, possibly in attempts to numb the pain of the breakup. I had never had a one-night stand before and decided to go home with the man I had been chatting and dancing with all evening. We arrived at his residence via Uber. It was booked by him, and it was uncannily clean. Think of hospital level of clean, right down to the smell. Without even offering, he pours us each a glass of seemingly expensive red wine. I thought nothing of it at that time, being that he poured it right in front of me and I drank it eagerly. That is the last memory I have. Prior to waking up in his bedroom due to the noise of the shower running, I was groggy and dazed when I wake up. But slowly, I began recollecting where I was and who I was with. I began to panic when I realized the only article of clothing still left on my body was my bra. And I frantically began to search for my cell phone, clothes, and wallet. I rushed out of his bedroom, hoping to leave unnoticed prior to him getting out of the shower, and my heart dropped. All of his furniture and floors were completely covered with plastic shower curtains, which I distinctly remember not being there prior to me blacking out. Worse yet, all of my personal belongings were placed neatly on his kitchen island alongside a hammer. My instincts kicked in, and I swiftly grabbed my things and ran out of the door, not even bothering to put my clothes on first. Once I was out of the door, I ran for several minutes in a random direction, panicked and adrenaline-fueled, slipping on my clothing as I ran. Once I finally stopped, I called a cab and went to my apartment, not speaking about this incident to anyone for a long time to come. The details that haunt me the most is that the only thing missing from my personal belongings was my ID. What were his intentions? Did he take my ID as some sort of trophy or memento of what he had planned for me that evening? What was put in that wine to sedate me in any way? Looking back on it, I realize I should have contacted the authorities immediately. Perhaps the reason for both, me not speaking up to the law enforcement or even informing my close family members and friends about the horrors I witnessed that evening, was because I was, and still am, highly ashamed of the impulsiveness and naivety I acted with that night. This eats away at me daily because I believe it is potentially too late for me to report the man, seeing as I do not have the slightest recollection of where his house was located or his real name. I did try to call the number he was texting me with that night, like the next morning, but it's no longer in service. Also, I am positive that I had my ID in my possession when we left the club. If anyone can give me advice on how or if I can still pursue this, I would be forever grateful. It weighs on my conscience to be in constant fear that he has hurt other females prior to and since my encounter. I was not in the right state of mind for not attempting to contact the authorities sooner. Anyways, potential serial rapist or murderer, let's never meet again. Number 2. This occurred in 2009. I was 22 years old and I was leaving my home state of California to head east for my corrections job. I was driving down the loneliest highway portion of the route, and it was around 3 a.m. on a Sunday. They don't call it the loneliest highway for nothing. I hadn't seen another soul for at least a half hour. I was getting sleepy, but I wasn't tired enough to pull over and take a nap. When I saw a broken down car on the side of the highway, I slowed and saw a woman standing next to the car. I approached this woman with caution, rolling down my window just a sliver. Something about her wasn't right. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I know now it was my subconscious screaming, "Red flag! Red flag!" I asked her if she needed me to call a tow truck or AAA for her, and she immediately tried to open my door. I explained to her I didn't feel comfortable letting her in, but I'd wait until a tow truck came. She immediately got this look of rage on her face, started berating me. "You're a big man, what am I going to do to you?" saying I was cruel for not letting her in. This is where I fucked up. I can see this now, 10 years later. I begrudgingly unlocked my door, figuring she's right. She's at most 5'2", and I'm over 6 feet, and I have 100 pounds over her. She looked to be about 90 pounds or so. She slips in, and I ask her who I can call. This was 10 years ago, so I had a little BlackBerry slide, I think, at that time. She starts telling me that she'd just prefer if I'd give her a ride to the next town. Now, I'm starting to realize I done fucked up because she's avoiding eye contact and she's fumbling in her purse. And when I mention calling for help, she's getting aggressive, demanding I take her to the next town. I'm so busy trying to unfuck this situation, I miss a man who either was hiding in or near her car. It wasn't until he was almost to my driver's side door that I managed to catch him in my rear view mirror. Flight or fight kicked in. I put my car in drive and sped off right as the fucker was reaching for my car door. I sped off and heard a ping noise, and then my rear view mirror exploding. He was shooting at me. The adrenaline alone had me doing near 90, and by this time, homegirl realized in whatever drug-induced torpor she was in, her little plan was futile. She started hitting me, telling me to stop and let her out. When I reached enough of a distance, I did just that. I pulled over and demanded she got the fuck out. She started going for that oversized purse she had, but I had enough. I was literally shaking with adrenaline. I reached over the open door and pretty much shoved her out. I tried grabbing for her purse, but she managed to hold onto it, not before dumping half of what was in there on my passenger seat. I sped off my door, still open, and waited till I got a good distance from her and slammed it shut and locked it. I clenched the wheel and drove, if on something autopilot. It wasn't until later that morning I pulled into a Denny's did I realize how close I was to pretty much dying. I had a good cry and then realized a bunch of her things spilled onto my passenger seat. Most of it was nasty, wadded up napkins, a few tubes of lipstick, and drug paraphernalia. I had considered calling the cops or finding a highway patrol officer. I did do something stupid. I tossed all her things that had fallen into a trash bag and threw them away. At that time, I had the dream of becoming a cop and knew if I got caught with drug paraphernalia, that would be impossible. I didn't think they'd believe me that drug paraphernalia wasn't mine. I noticed a cop at the gas station across from the Denny's and told him what happened, but he pretty much berated next for pulling over and then letting her in. He did say he'd look into it, but I doubt he did. I was so shaken, I pretty much picked up my pancakes and then left to continue on my way. I never did replace that mirror, and I ended up selling my car as where I lived didn't require me to have one. Till this day, 10 years later, I hesitate to stop and help stranded motorists. Number 3. So this literally happened 30 minutes ago. I'm driving to work and it's about 3:30 a.m. I take 3 different routes to work, but I've been taking the same one for a while now since there's construction everywhere else. I'm driving down this road, and on either side of the road is all subdivisions. I'm listening to a podcast, trying to keep myself awake until I can go get some coffee. I start getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach, but I thought it was just my body telling me to get some caffeine and maybe something to eat. I ignore it and continue driving. All of a sudden, this guy starts running out in the middle of the road. I barely see him since he was wearing dark clothes, and I managed to slow down, and I noticed he looked pretty freaked out. Now, I listen to a lot of creepy podcasts ranging from true crime to supernatural, and I know the rules to stay safe in situations, and I wish I listened to them today. I normally wouldn't stop, but I knew that if something happened to me, I would want someone to stop too, and so I did. Luckily, I kept my car running, and I rolled down my window a little bit just so I can talk to this guy. I asked him if he was okay, and he started freaking out, saying someone was trying to kill him. He told me his dog was ripped apart in his front lawn, and he tried to pick up the remains to try and bury it. But he saw a man running after him with a knife. He said he thought it was probably a coyote or something, so he wasn't suspicious, but he ran off when he saw this man. Now, I was pretty freaked out about it, but I noticed something. Yeah, it was dark, but with the lights on inside my car and the lights that were out on front, I could see pretty well. He was younger, about mid-30s, dark black hair and green eyes. He was wearing a hunter's jacket and jeans. Well, I live in Idaho, so hunter jackets is a pretty normal attire. What I noticed, however, there was no blood or fur anywhere on him. I asked him why there wasn't any blood on him, and his whole demeanor changed. It was like turning off the switch. My blood went cold. He stared at me for what felt like hours, but it was only a couple of seconds. What came out of his mouth was the final straw for me. His whole body relaxed. He stopped shaking, and he leaned towards my window and smiled at me. It was a twisted type of smile, and his eyes went dark. He took a deep breath and said, "I was going to help you." He then started cackling and tried to open my car door, and I immediately rolled up the window. I put my car in drive and sped off down the road, not stopping for anything. And once I finally got to work, I started crying. I still have 10 minutes before I have to go in, and honestly, I'm terrified to get out of my car. So to the guy that wanted to help me, let's not meet ever again. Number 4. A few years ago, I was renting a house in Northern California. The neighborhood was just outside the suburbs, and it seemed like the perfect balance of having space and having nice neighbors close enough not to feel isolated. The area had no streetlights, so it was very dark at night, especially if there were clouds blocking the moonlight. It didn't bother me though. It made my little house feel even more quaint on dark nights. I got home from work one day in midwinter. It was a cloudy night, so pulling up to my house, I saw only what my headlights and front porch light illuminated. When I got out of my car, I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke. That was odd, as I have never smelled that before around the house. I didn't see anyone nearby, and so I ignored it and went inside. I had just got off a shift with a few hours of overtime, so I felt pretty tired, even though it was 7. I decided to take a shower and call it a night. I woke up some time later, sure that I had heard a noise inside my house. I wasn't worried right away because my friend would sometimes stop by to use my shower after work on his way to his night classes. I even gave him a spare key so he could stop by even if I wasn't home. He would always text me to let me know beforehand though, and I hadn't heard my phone go off. I reached over to my bedside table and picked up my cell phone to see if my friend had sent me a text. The bright light from my phone screen and number pad blinded me. These were the days before phones had a light sensor that would dim the screen in the dark. And this particular phone was so bright, I could even use it as a flashlight. Through squinted eyes, I could make out that it was 9 or something, but I couldn't tell if I had unread a text or not. I set my phone aside and called out my friend's name. There was a couple of seconds of silence before I heard loud footfalls as someone started running through the bottom floor of my house. I leapt out of bed and ran to the closet. They were already up the stairs by that time, and I had opened the door and stepped inside. That house had 3 rooms upstairs, 2 bedrooms on the either side of the hallway, the one I was in, and the spare, and a bathroom at the end. The bedroom doors were both closed, but the bathroom door was cracked open. I heard whoever was in my house thunder down the hallway past my door and into the bathroom. Thank God he did. That gave me enough time to open the attic access in the ceiling of my closet and hoist myself up. I had just started to lift myself up when the person ran back out of the bathroom. My feet were barely inside of the attic when my bedroom door burst open. I heard footsteps run into my room and stop. When they didn't see me in that room, they ran back to the hallway and into the other room, which just had boxes stacked in a corner, some weights, and a table where I painted my miniature models. I guess they decided that if someone were hiding, it would be in the bedroom because they charged back into my room and turned on the light. A moment later, the closet door was ripped open. I was crouched in my attic, just a foot or so away from the access, so I could try to stop them if they started to climb up. From my vantage point, all I could see was from about their knee down. They were wearing dirty blue jeans with frayed cuffs and worn work boots. After a few seconds of looking in the closet, they stepped away and I heard a loud crash come from my room, followed by a scream of frustration and anger. That scream was the most unnerving part of the incident for me. It reminded me far too much of my stepfather, who would scream in a similar way when he lost his temper. He would eventually be put in a mental hospital for several mental disorders that resulted in erratic and violent tendencies. The man in my house ran back down the stairs. I heard crashes and clatters as things were thrown around and furniture was knocked over. I stayed crouched in the attic. I had left my cell phone when I ran for the closet, and I wasn't certain I could climb down without him hearing. After some time, the noises stopped, and I started counting slowly. When I reached 1,000, I decided it was safe enough to climb down and call the police. The first thing I noticed when I exited the closet was the intruder had flipped my bed over. I assumed in an attempt to find me. That was the loud noise I had heard after he stepped away from the closet. And I couldn't find my cell phone, so I went to the landline and called the police. I waited in my room until I heard them call out from downstairs. The first floor was a mess, but I had expected that. Chairs had been knocked over, the sofa had been flipped, all the books, pictures, and knickknacks I had on my shelves were strewn across the floor. The cupboards in the kitchen had been opened, and all the boxed and canned foods had been thrown to the ground. And as far as I could tell though, the only thing missing was a single knife out of the wooden block in my kitchen. The police checked the house from top to bottom, and they found that the side door had been forced open by something like a crowbar. They also found a few cigarette butts along my fence line with some foil and an empty pen tube, which the police said which people often use to smoke meth, so they think he had been watching my house for a while. I realized that he must have been out there smoking a cigarette when I got home. They collected up the evidence and told me I should stay with my family and friends that night and get that door fixed as soon as possible. I opted to just not sleep. I moved a shelf over to block the broken door and spent the next couple hours cleaning things up. I would often go to the window with a flashlight and shine it along the fence line where the police found the cigarette butts and foil, but I didn't see anything. The next day, I called to have the door fixed and motion lights installed at the back of the sides of my house. and I ran a phone cable up into the attic and added a landline. I never wanted to be stuck there without a phone again. Nothing else happened at that house though, and I lived there another 3 years without incident. One more precaution I took was practicing getting out of my bed, going to my closet, and climbing into the attic as quickly and as quietly as possible. I even kept at it when I moved. Even now, I go to a crawl space at the back of the closet instead of the attic. I try not to think about what would have happened if I had been a bit slower getting to the attic, or if he hadn't gone into the bathroom at the end of the hall first. Hi everybody, it's your creepy older sister here. Thank you so much for listening. You have no idea how I appreciate this. Since the channel is fairly new though, I would like to hear some comments or suggestions from you so that I can continuously improve my coming videos. If you want to know what the name of the channel means, you can check out the description below. If you want to send me stories to read, you can also check out my email and send it there. It's also in the description. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so we can grow together here, and I'll definitely try my best to upload more each week. Once again, thank you very, very much. And to all the creepy experiences, bad vibes, scary people, and paranormal encounters, together we say to them, Tabi-tabi po.